Thanks for taking the time to watch my video about mushroom dissection. This video will help you understand the different parts of a fungus that we typically call a mushroom, and you'll get a better understanding of what you're looking at and how a mushroom contributes to our environment. A couple things that you're going to need are a magnifying glass, a plastic fork or knife, some newspaper to protect your work surface, and a mushroom. It's important when you're doing this to make sure that you purchase a mushroom at the grocery store and not find one outside. The ones at the grocery store are edible. If you find one outside, you may or may not have what you think you have, so it's always really important to make sure you get a mushroom from the grocery store. It's not a good idea to eat the mushrooms as you're dissecting them, as most mushrooms should be cooked, so it would discourage your students from eating the mushroom even though it's edible. So to get started, let's prepare our work surface. We'll take our newspaper and open it flat. This can be done one per student, or it can be done individually as room and supplies allow for. We're going to take the fungi and just lay it on the side. Before we begin, let's talk a little bit about the external features of a typical gilled mushroom. There's several types of fungi. One group is called gilled fungi because they have gills under the cap. Another type of mushroom that you might be familiar with are morels. Those are not gilled fungi because they do not have gills. They reproduce in a different way. So on a typical gilled fungi, you will notice that it has a cap, a ring, a stem or stipe, it has gills, and it also comes out of a vulva. What you see on a typical gilled fungi is really only the reproductive structure of the fungus. The majority of the fungus lives underground and spreads through tiny hair-like threads called mycelium. The mycelium comprise a huge underground network of tangled threads. Mycelium work together to push up a fruiting body, which is what we normally call a mushroom. So this part of the mushroom, if you think about an apple tree turned to the side with only an apple sticking up out of the ground, this mushroom would represent that apple. The majority of the apple tree, the trunk, the branches, the leaves, the roots, and all the other parts of the apple tree would be buried underground. So although this looks like a very large mushroom, imagine the mycelial network under the ground as being much larger than that. So let's get started taking a look at the different parts of the fungi. First, we will put this to the side and we'll take a look at the underneath of the fungi. A lot of times, if you've cooked with mushrooms before, you'll either break the stem off as you're cooking with them, or you'll leave it attached. For our purposes, since we want to examine the gills closely, I'm going to hold the fungi in one hand and snap the stipe off. It usually comes off very easily. Now I've separated the stipe from the cap. The cap of the mushroom exists to hold the gills in place. Mushrooms are not the same as plants. Mushrooms reproduce through spores. The spores of a gilled fungi I should say, are located in between each one of these tiny gills. So taking your plastic knife, lead your students in a way that will cross-cut the cap of the fungi. Break it off, and we have a piece of the cap. And in my hand is a piece of the gill. So each one of these gills is tightly packed in here to hold the spores of the fungi. So what's interesting with your students is to have them take a magnifying glass and examine the inside gill arrangement of the fungi. Now, spores are microscopic, so you won't be able to see them. However, after you do your mushroom dissection with your class, you can leave a cap turned upside down on a clean white piece of paper, and overnight it will leave a spore print. The spore print is indicative of what type of mushroom it is. So that's very interesting lesson extension you can do with your students. I would encourage you to allow your students to just feel the different texture of the mushroom as they're dissecting it. Ask them to describe to you in descriptive words what the cap feels like, how the gills feel. They can use all their senses on this activity. How does it smell? What does it feel like? Do they see anything that they might not have thought of? And again, I would discourage the use of taste on this, and it probably won't make a sound, but we will have covered 3 of the 5 senses. Moving down, we have the other part. This is the part of the fungi that comes out of the ground before the cap. Going back to the diagram, many mushrooms start as a volva, and that is a small egg-shaped protrusion that comes out of the ground. It's swollen, and within just a few hours even of a rain, out of the vulva will come a stipe. Stipe is the proper mycological term. Stem refers to the structures used in plants. So we will call this the stipe. And what we have here is called the ring. The ring is the portion of the vulva that got pushed up by the stipe. And you can see that portion right here on this particular fungi. And this, by the way, is a large portabella. You can buy these in bulk at some grocery stores, and they're very inexpensive. You don't have to have as large of a fungi as the one that I am demonstrating with today. A container of small white button mushrooms will provide the same hands-on experience for your students, and it will be pretty cost effective as well. A box of them usually only costs about $2. So back to our dissection. We have, as I said, the ring around the top here. Some fungi retain this ring, and some fungi drop this ring off. So you won't always expect to see that it has a ring. Coming up to the top, this is where it was attached to the cap. And down here, at the very base of the stipe, now you can see that this is covered with dirt. This is the part that did come out of the ground first. So you can see on this particular fungi that the vulva area is a little swollen. It won't be like that on all fungi at all times, but on this particular one, it does do a pretty nice job of showing us that. So let's dissect this part. Now you can have your students do a cross section, either across this way. Some stipes are a little bit more woody than other ones, and this shows you that this is distinctly different than a plant stem. A plant stem is made of woody tissue called cellulose. A fungi's tissue is made up of chitin, which is actually the same material as found on an insect's exoskeleton. That was one way of cutting it. I cut it this way. So let's cut it across horizontally. And again, we have the inside of the stipe. This shows us again that there's many layers of mycelium pushed together to form this structure, which is why a mushroom can literally pop up overnight. They don't grow in the same way that a plant grows. So now we have dissected our fungi completely. There are many, many extension activities you can do with your students at this point, depending on the age and interest level of your students. You can take a look at the gill arrangement along here. The gill arrangement is unique to each type of fungi. You can take another look at the arrangement around the edges of the cap. That's also a clue to a fungi's identity. You can have your students do somewhat of a textural experiment, and fungi do crumble up very easily. So sometimes they just like to get their fingers in it and feel it, and that's fine too, because again, that helps with the sensory learning. When you're all finished with your dissection, make sure all your students do wash their hands. These are, since you purchased them at the grocery store, not toxic, but students do need to wash their hands and use good hygiene as they would in any scientific activity. So it's always important as a teacher to encourage proper scientific exploration. Again, I said that there were several extension activities that you could do with this. Getting a hold of some books at your local library is always helpful, and it will help your higher level students stay interested in the activity and provide them with some extension materials. There's many different types of handbooks available. This particular one is called the Mushroom Handbook, and it does provide several illustrated plates which are interesting. And possible extension activity you could do with this activity is to involve your students in a little bit of botanical illustration, as these pictures show. Finally, their classification skills, which are so important to understanding natural history, can be enhanced by encouraging your students to learn how to use what is called a key. In the beginning of many different types of field guides is a list that will help you narrow down what type of species you have. So I hope that you've enjoyed this short look at the anatomy of a fungi, specifically a gilled fungi, and I hope that it encourages you to explore your natural world a little bit more. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.
Visit greenteacher.com to find links to other videos, webinars, books, and Green Teacher, our quarterly magazine for youth educators. While there, sign up for our free mailing list to learn more about upcoming free webinars and videos.